should Nick have been fired too? And now that we know he's not fired, what's the confidence level in Caserio actually getting this hire right?
The confidence level is a combination of optimism from me as well as the devil you do know is better than the devil you don't know. There's a lot that comes with changing over a general manager. And the way that statement last night read, the second highest ranking official in the entire organization under ownership is Nick Caserio. Like the way that they announced that Cal McNair and Nick Caserio are going to make this hire, it made it sound like Nick Caserio is the second most important person outside of ownership and Cal McNair and the ownership group in the entire organization. And that's probably the case. And so you have to think about where you have to go. Like, you'd have to open up a whole nother search for a GM and then have that person come in and start talking to the head coaches. Now, the head coaching interviewing process doesn't really jump off to a large degree for about another week or so. You start requesting, and then the interviews start flying in. And then you start, it's a Zoom initially, and then you can start meeting guys in person. And some of these guys are going to coach till maybe the Super Bowl. Some of these guys you're going to talk to. Mm-hmm. It's like you'd have time to get a GM in place, but there's so much changeover and so much chaos associated with firing both of those. And if you're Cal McNair and you sit here and you really want to honestly assess the opportunities here, Nick Caserio has not had a normal year to hire his guy that he wants without some sort of drastic change to the plan that the organization had put together. The plan had an organizational plan to trade Deshaun Watson and then hire a coach based on having the ability to go out there and use the Deshaun Watson picks in that draft, and then they couldn't trade Deshaun Watson. Okay? And then the organization had a plan to hire Josh McCown. We don't know how that would have worked out. I wasn't in favor of it. And then they didn't hire Josh McCown, and they pivoted to a guy they never interviewed. So no normal year yet for Nick Caserio. If you're an owner and you felt strongly about the guy 2 years ago, and you have some optimism that now he's going to get to make his hire, no questions asked, you give him that opportunity, and that's what Cal McNair's come to, and that's how I would have operated as well.
Yesterday's result ticked me off so much. It had me wanting to fire Nick Caserio. I mean, that was the first time in his tenure, and he hasn't done everything right. We've talked about some of our disagreements with him over his tenure, but yesterday's result ticked me off so much that right after that game went final, I wanted to move on from Caserio and completely clean house. But the further I've distanced myself from the game, I think my cooler head has started to prevail a little bit, and I've started to agree with you, Cody. And that really has been my stance more often than not. Just 2 years into a 6-year rebuild, the Deshaun Watson thing being completely out of his control. And if you want to criticize Nick Caserio for not trading Watson sooner, I guess you could, but he got a tremendous, tremendous return for Deshaun Watson by slow playing that thing as much as he did. To this point, that's the best thing Nick Caserio has done, honestly, the way he handled that whole Deshaun Watson deal. So it's been bad. It's been unprecedented, though, and I'm cool with him getting another year and another hire. But obviously, he's got to get this one right or he'll be gone as well.
I would have fired him because now you're committing to at least 2 more years of Nick Caserio because you're going to hire a third coach in 3 years. That coach is getting more than 1 year. So you're not going to fire Nick after this year and then leave the coach in place and hire a new GM. I mean, maybe they would do that. That's what dysfunctional organizations like the Texans do. But I don't think that makes much sense. I would have no issue cleaning house after what happened yesterday. He made them a national embarrassment yesterday. Like, they were being laughed at by everybody yesterday, even on the broadcast. Spiro Dietis is like, who's going to get the number 1 pick? Like, it never should have came down to that. The Bears clearly valued the number 1 pick. Why? Because they had a head coach in place that understood the assignment. Ryan Poles, the GM, hired Matt Eberflus in Chicago. They're on the same page. Like, the whole shenanigans of going from David Culley in the first place, then to Lovie Smith, is why this team doesn't have the number 1 pick right now. Then you factor in how Caserio handled the Brandon Cook situation, and that directly led to why you don't have the number 1 pick right now. And here's my biggest thing with Cal McNair. He has come out and he has said that, he wants to change the perception of the Texans, and we've talked about some of the PR stuff they've done to try and engage this fan base. And it's like, you got rid of O'Brien, okay. You got rid of Jack Easterby, okay. But, like, both these guys wanted to hire Nick Caserio in the first place. So, like, Nick kind of feels like he's lumped in with that Patriot way style. So I would have had no issue if they totally cleaned house and used yesterday as, like, the reason to move on from Nick and then think about how attractive this job is. If you're a GM, you come in, you have the 2nd pick in the draft, additional first-round picks, cap space, weak division. I think it would have made your job, your opening for GM and head coach really, really attractive for the right candidate. So I understand why he's back. I get it. You guys are right. He hasn't had, your typical offseason, but I'm very weary based on his first 2 hires that he's going to be able to hire the right guy to lead this team going forward.
If he hires one of the 5 guys they've requested, that's way better than either of the other 2 hires, though.
Mm-hmm.
He's on the way. He's on the way. If they hires from the 5 guys the Texans have requested to this point, which is Shane Steichen, the OC in Philadelphia, Jonathan Gannon, the DC in Philadelphia, Ezra Evero, the DC in Denver, Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, and 49ers defensive coordinator D'Amico Ryans. If he hires one of those 5 guys, he's done a much better job than he had the first 2 times. But, again, it's a low bar to clear. I would also say this. Moving on from Lovie Smith after 1 year, moving on from David Culley after 1 year, neither of those guys are going to be a head coach ever again. Neither of those guys may coach in the NFL ever again. It's one thing to fire those guys after 1 year, move on from them quick. It's another thing to treat Brian Gaine the way you treated Brian Gaine, a respected front office guy in this league, and to treat Nick Caserio the way you would have treated Nick Caserio, firing him after 2 years, after you didn't let him hire the coach that he wanted to hire the previous year, as we believe it. It'd be one thing to treat these coaches that way, who aren't impressive guys, who aren't going to be in football again. It'd be another thing to have fired 2 general managers in very weird situations. I believe that would drastically affect your ability to hire the best general manager.
Caserio's kind of lumped in, though, with everything that's gone on. He was hired by Jack Easterby.
Now he's got to separate himself from all that. He's got to do better, and he's already done better less than 24 hours after the game's over.
Yeah, but be careful, Cody, with saying he's already done better. Like, we're asking the Texans to do the bare minimum as a functioning NFL franchise. Interview qualified guys. Like, they shouldn't get credit for requesting D'Amico Ryans and requesting to speak with Shane Steichen. Like, it's better than where they've been, but, like, this was the problem with Lovie Smith being hired in the first place. There was a sense from those in the media and this fan base, well, he's not Josh McCown, thank God. Meanwhile, the Texans were the only team that was going to give Lovie Smith a 3rd opportunity to be a head coach. So, like, the bar has to be set a lot higher than, well, they're requesting top candidates this time around. Like, I need to see more from Nick before I start to believe he's the right guy to lead this team going forward.
Yeah, but I can't change anything that he's already done. So it's like, what are you doing now? Like, what are your like the actions last year sucked. The coaching search sucked. That was an unimpressive group in the coaching search. That was one of the least impressive coaching searches of any team that hired a new coach last year. Like, the actions last year sucked. The actions this year are already significantly better. The speed at which they got rid of Lovie Smith, the speed at which they've requested 5 of the top candidates, and they may talk to all 5 of these top candidates. Like, the actions are better. And, oh, by the way, if I'm Nick Caserio, my conversation would be, look, I know a lot of people weren't on the Josh McCown thing. They weren't in favor of that. But if I got to hire my guy, we wouldn't be on our 3rd coach in 3 years. We'd be on year 2 of our coach, and we'd be ready to really accelerate into this rebuild with the 2nd year of a coach that I wanted. So for him not being able, like, I understand that we're going to hire the idea, like, we're going to use Josh McCown as the idea against him, but it can't be everything can't be against him in that Lovie Smith, Josh McCown conversation. Like, well, he hired Lovie Smith. We didn't get to hire the guy he wanted. Well, that was Josh McCown. It's like, it's all negative. Like, at some point, he has to get a break on some of the weird crap that he's dealt with. Because remember, he's not the reason this organization is dysfunctional. It was dysfunctional before he walked in, and he thought he took the job because he was going to GM Deshaun Watson. And then a day later, the quarterback's like, screw you guys, I'm out of here. So it's like, the dysfunction's not because of him. Like, he's been tainted by being around it, but he's not the reason for the dysfunction of this organization.
What if he hires Josh McCown?
I'm out. If he hires Josh McCown,
like all this interview stuff is great.
Yeah.
I'm glad they're shopping at the top, but he could still be like, I'm going to request to interview Josh McCown and then end up hiring him.
That's where you lose all faith in Cal McNair. Josh McCown should be nowhere near this coaching search. And if they ask to interview Josh McCown, you fire Nick Caserio and then hire a new GM at that point. Because if he is operating, again, actions are speaking louder. If he's operating like this is a sham interview process and he's just going to hire his guy a year later, then fire him and don't give him that opportunity. Like, I don't think it's totally out of the question. Dysfunctional organizations do dysfunctional things. I think it's totally out of the question Nick Caserio gets fired before he makes a hire, if he operates in a way that deserves being fired.
Final point or final question to you. You understand why there's a lot of people that have serious doubts on Nick Caserio, though, right? Like, you defended them there, but do you understand why there's a lot of people that wanted to see both him and Lovie gone yesterday?
No, I'm not ignoring the negatives that are on Nick Caserio's resume since he got here, since the decisions he made. Like, yes, there should be healthy skepticism and heavy skepticism of Nick Caserio in this process. But the devil you do know and the normalcy of this year is better than what he's dealt with the past couple of years.